Hello, guys. This is Fight Commentary Breakdowns, and this is probably going on Fight Commentary Chats, but we got a Kung Fu pal of mine. This was a guy I trained with back in the day. This is Shifu Lucas, and he has his own school now in Albany, New York, right?
Yes. Yes. The
Cool.
Chinese
So,
Martial Arts Academy.
Chinese Martial Arts Academy, Shifu Lucas. Welcome, Shifu Lucas.
I appreciate it. It's great to reconnect. I know we've stayed in touch over the years, but I'm glad to finally sit down and, do it formally.
Exactly. So, Lucas, when I met you, you definitely was already a very skilled kung fu person. So, when along your kung fu journey was it that we met? Were you trained for like 3 years, 2 years, 7 years?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I started with karate when I was a little kid, Kyokushin, and then I stopped training and rediscovered kung fu when I was in high school. So like 13. So kind of late compared to some of those, the U.S. guys who were training since they were kids and didn't take breaks. But so I had started around 13, and then I trained for 3 years under my instructor in Albany. And then I told my instructor, I had gone back to China with him, and I just was all about that life, and I wanted to eat, breathe, and, train. And that's it. That's just, all I focused it on. And I told them I'm going to Shaolin after high school. That's my path. And they said, no, you're not. You're going to go to the Beijing Sports University. And I didn't know what that was. I was kind of disappointed because it didn't sound as sexy to me. And but my parents were super supportive. I'm very lucky, very fortunate to have had a great support system. And between my coaches and my parents, they made it happen. And I went over to China and trained over at Beijing Sports University. And that was 2003, which was getting ready for USA team trials. So it was kind of like the, 4 years in was just about the right time to start thinking about competing at that level, I think. And then SARS hit. And basically all the universities went on lockdown, and I tried to keep training, but, it was very hard to make happen given the limitations, as we can understand now, given the pandemic in the U.S. and how that can impact your training. So I said, I got to keep training, getting ready for this thing, and talked to a bunch of people. They said Squaw, Southern California, or Ome. And I'm an East Coast guy, so it was an easy choice. I said, I'm going to Ome, and just set up over, at George Mason University because it was close and they had summer housing, and started training with Lu Shaolin then and there. And after that, I decided I was going to attend George Mason just to be next to Ome and be able to train there throughout my, undergraduate career. And so we probably met, I guess, during that time, because I was there on and off. So basically I would train in China as much as I could. And so I was like a year in China, a year at George Mason, a summer in China, back at Mason, back to a year in China. I kept getting all these opportunities to go study abroad, which just meant train abroad. And I got, government scholarships from China, government scholarships from the US, and I just kept training. And so, I got to work with I got to meet a whole bunch of different generations. Just as I got to Ome, it was when I think like some of the, like Anita Lopez and some of that generation was getting out of Wushu. And then the kind of a newer generation was doing really strong, Sarah Chang and, Jason and a whole bunch of other, athletes. And then I trained on and off over the next few years. And so I got to see a couple of different generations at Ome. And so, we probably crossed paths, you could correct me, but probably 2005, something around that time. I don't know when
Yeah, I'll have to think about this because from what I remember, I had that one summer with you. It was awesome, and then I think you left for a little bit, and that's when I left too. And then I remember I visited the school again, maybe a year or two later, and then I saw you again. I was like, "Whoa, Lucas is back!" And I was like, "Oh, if only Lucas were there." Yeah. So I think I met you in one of those times. Maybe it was that summer you first came down. To train or something. I think it was that.
Yeah, because I probably took a year off after that because I had already deferred from college for 1 year. And so I went to Towson University actually, because I had gone there to compete during I forgot, one of those USA WKF things. So that's all I knew about the world, was like, oh, I want to go to this college because I competed there once. And then I got there and I realized the USA WKF, Anthony Go's school wasn't the place for me to be training, and decided to transfer to Mason.
Mm-hmm.
So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know you were so young, man. You seem like an adult, but you were actually just getting out of high school, basically, when I met you. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that shows, I guess, that's a compliment to you, because you seem like one of the coolest guys there, and part of felt like you were more mature than a lot of the people there. Because when I was training there, I was really unhappy. You probably remember I cursed a lot, but that wasn't completely due to Kung Fu. It was just I think I needed to be in combat sports at a very young age. I just never got it because my parents didn't understand anything about martial arts, so I was like always dancing, and I was like, what the heck is what was the purpose of this?
I think you and I probably have very similar experiences, different in of course, but I feel like that, a lot of us probably went into Wushu looking for Kung Fu or martial arts in general. And I think for me, I didn't know I was doing Wushu for the first few years. And then I understood what Wushu was, and I accepted it and I ran with it, and I identified as a Wushu athlete and not but in my heart, I think I always felt like I was a martial artist. And when I finally stopped competing, I had a lot of that resentment, and just, I was over Wushu, and it did nothing for me. And, I did have obviously a lot of friendships and good experiences, but, I did feel like I didn't learn anything about martial arts. I didn't learn what I had originally set out to do 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so now, it's kind of come full circle a little bit, but definitely had some of that similar sentiment.
Yeah. And I remember when we reconnected again in 2015 or late 2014, I started making videos on martial arts again. I didn't even have fight commentary breakdowns at the time, but I knew I had to make videos on the martial arts, because combining that filmmaking interest with martial arts was going to get me back into martial arts eventually. I remember we had this long conversation in the comment section of Sensei Donnie, who's the American Kempo guy who got me back into martial arts. And we're just talking about our journey. And I was like, wow, Lucas shared a lot of my frustrations. And I remember in the comment section, you talked about how you for a little bit after you stopped competing in Wushu, you got into MMA, right? So you did some of that combat sports stuff.
Yeah. Well, basically, that's been my life for the last 10 years or so. Is I love MMA, and that's where I put my basically, when I started teaching Wushu, I didn't want to. I wasn't interested in it. I told my friend I'm not interested in opening a school. We had talked about some opportunities, and then I went up and coached a class, and I realized it was amazing, and I love connecting with people through martial arts, and it's just the perfect vehicle for me to help people achieve their goals, health and happiness through training. And but there's no reason. I just felt like, hey, if I'm going to be working 8 hours a day and squeezing in mat time for personal training, I'd rather be coaching Wushu 8 hours a day and squeezing in mat time for personal training, in combat sports. So I feel like, that's still been my major focus. And I do plan to one day come back to Chinese arts for personal practices. But right now, I primarily look at Chinese arts is the thing I'm most qualified in to help people pursue martial arts, achievement and success in martial arts.
I see. So let's jump back into the being the Wushu athlete. Was it mostly a good time for you? Was it like, so you had a lot of fun? I mean, I know your personality. You are a very kind of you like to take risks socially, which I really admired in you. So you would always try to speak Chinese to people. You'd always like put yourself out there. And your Chinese, I know, was pretty good. I remember we reconnected before we reconnected on Facebook. I randomly saw you that one year that the Beijing Wushu team came to perform in the DC metropolitan area. This was 2011, I think, the summer. And it was kind of I remember you'd speak Chinese to all the
Yeah.
Beijing team, and they'd be
Yeah.
like, because they would speak Chinese among themselves, and I'd be like, there's that white guy who speaks Chinese like a Chinese person. I was like, man,
Yeah.
that's my man Lucas.
Yeah, that was so I ended up doing my master's degree in Chinese, and for me, I basically went over at 17 to China,
Mm-hmm.
determined to train. I had already gone over there once, and I didn't like China. I just had a bad experience my first time. I didn't. It was hot. I didn't get it. It just was everything. I just saw everything through the wrong lens, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And I got there when I was 18, and I was like, gut it out, Luke. Just train hard all day, every day.
Yeah.
And no matter what your experiences is, just keep your head down. And within a week, I was like, I fell in love with the country, the people, the food, its culture, the language, everything
Yeah.
was just, I mean, I had already had that interest, but I just fell in love with it over there. And so, I just felt like, there's a lot of different experiences people have in China, but I wanted that full immersion. And what I tell people all the time is, because I'd see expats over there and they were trying to pretend like they weren't living in China.
Exactly.
And I think that, that's obviously some people aren't there by choice. So, they don't, but I do always feel like you get back what you put into it, just like
Yeah.
Kung Fu, just like martial arts. And if you go to China and you want to love China, China will love you too.
Yeah.
Like you go over there, you try your hardest, you learn the language, you show respect, you show appreciation, you show genuine interest in what they have, and they will embrace you and, open arms. And I just found like wherever I trained, people were so generous and
Yeah.
encouraging, and you would train with top teams all over. I mean, I trained with top teams all over China, and everybody was welcoming. It's a different sport because obviously I'm not competing with them and it's not combative.
Mm-hmm.
But man, everybody was just like excited to have a foreign friend. And I thought it was a really great place to be. And so I think it made me even more outgoing because
Mm-hmm.
the more outgoing I was there, I felt like the more, people showed, kindness. So yeah.
I think your experience in China is exactly how people should do it. Like the more outgoing you are there, in a genuine way,
Yeah.
the more kind people are there in China. And like going to China does make you more extroverted if you go there with the purpose of learning about the culture and meeting the
Yeah.
people. Like people will allow you to be extroverted because they'll be like, oh, this person loves our culture. So you can, even though Chinese culture traditionally doesn't like people like me who's like this, but hey, if you're foreign there, they're like, yeah, cool, you can be like
Yes.
this, you know.
I know what you mean by that. But yeah, I do think, foreigners get a lot of extra leeway.
Mm-hmm.
You can speak, you don't have, they don't have the same expectations for language, or, you get a lot of get out of jail free cards.
Yeah.
You get a lot of leeway and encouragement. So, for the most part, I think it helped facilitate some of that, being extroverted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, first of all, the fact that you were training on the SARS put a break to it is something we're talking about too. But also, did you try for the U.S.
Yeah.
Team? Okay,
So
tell
I
me more
tried
about
out.
that.
I tried out in 03. I missed 05. I was training in China, but I got injured. My back. I had back problems on and off the whole time. I had like
Mm-hmm.
I always forget how to say it. Spondylolysis. It was like fractures in the vertebra from like too much hyperextension.
Mm-hmm.
So like I just had over exaggerated posture, and I would do a lot of arching and anyway. Probably hyper mobility. I don't know if you remember, but I had like some crazy, chin to toe flexibility, that kind of stuff. And I think I was hyper mobile.
Honestly, I don't remember, but okay.
Yeah, I had some of that crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I missed 05. I did nationals on the side, but I could not jump. I just could not like throw, my jump kicks. So I did nationals. So I can say I won nationals, but because it was held at the same time as team trials, so
Mm-hmm.
nobody was on the other mat. And then I did in 07, I competed and made B team, which is the alternate for the World Games, and represented. So we're guaranteed placement for the Pan American Games,
Mm-hmm.
and then competed at Pan Ams and medaled for broadsword.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
I remember broadsword was one of your your like things, man. You were always
Yeah.
good at broadsword.
Honestly, I wish I had stuck with it. I got too excited in '03 when they changed the rules to be, you design your own forms. And I switched. I went from Southern broadsword and staff, which I felt like I was decent at, and I switched to long fist, straight sword, and spear. And those were the wrong events for me. I just don't have the body type, the spirituality, the mentality. It didn't fit me. So I kind of swam upstream through '05, and then I just switched right back to broadsword and Southern, and I did a lot better again in '07.
Yeah. It's really funny that we talk about the different styles, and of course, in a very general term, of course, there's a lot of nuances, but the northern styles and the southern styles are different, right? It really depends on the body type, like you said.
Yeah.
Like Jason was so good with any of the southern styles because Jason was like really fit, like he had a lot of muscle, and he was not very tall. So combine that together, he just looks so good.
Compact, explosive. You know, he didn't have adequate mobility or flexibility for long fist, but he didn't need it.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't. So I felt like Southern was just perfect for him. It just allowed him to showcase, and then again, I think also beyond just body type is your energy. So are you kind of, I think if you, like for me, when I demo, I get really nervous and I get really tight and it makes it hard to showcase long fist. But when you get, that aggressive, you can kind of channel that better in Southern. So I think, again, it's body type, but also kind of your spirit or your energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So let's talk a little about when you sort of started exploring combat sports. What was that like? How did you approach the gym, etc.?
Basically '09, I graduated. So I had already been on the U.S. team for those 2 years, from '07 to '09. Competed at Pan Ams. I trained another year in China at that point after Pan American Games, and I just felt like I felt like I had kind of peaked physically and obviously not, there's no such peak, but I felt like I had gone as far as I could go. I felt like I had made the USA team, which had always been kind of my goal. And then obviously I could, I just felt like Wushu didn't do it for me anymore. I felt like I wanted to explore martial arts in a different way. And I remember saying at that time, I'm going to do Kyokushin. I'm going to get into that. That's going to be my jam. And somebody talked me into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They were like, you got to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I got out and I moved to DC. It took me a couple months to find a job, but I eventually moved to DC and just went right to Lloyd Irving's MMA. Eventually I switched over to, what was it called? It was a Hoist Gracie Academy. And basically I just trained as much as I could. I was doing Muay Thai 3 days a week, Jiu-Jitsu 3 days a week, boxing on whatever, judo, whatever days they had. I would do judo camps on Sundays, whatever it was. I just, every single day I wanted it to be stacked with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then I kept, like, I was getting killed by everybody. Anybody who had 6 months in anything would destroy me. And I was so frustrated because they would all say, oh, what did you train? Why are you? And I was like, I look like I should be a martial artist, you know what I mean? But I can't fight at all. And so I fell in love with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's been my primary focus. I just love the sport. It was so foreign to me. I couldn't fake it. Like if I walked into a Thai gym, I'd get beat up, but I could fake movement. And, I could look like shadow boxing. I could look like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I fell in love more so with Jiu-Jitsu, and I've done that ever since. I'm a 2-stripe brown belt at Renzo Gracie gym. So that's been my primary focus. Just again, almost infatuated, but I've tried not to get infatuated like Wushu wise. I tried to just be like, okay, it's just what you do an hour a day or 2 hours a day or whatever it is. It's not your life. You don't memorize every athlete. But then, so that's been my primary focus, but I've done everything, Muay Thai, and, we have a Sanda class. I primarily use, Bang Muay Thai's online program. I love that system. I think it's just a super sophisticated, system. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically, Dwayne Ludwig, he's got an online program. Well, he's got his own program, but he's got one online as well, the Ninja Academy, and it's fantastic. It's just it's a whole system for kickboxing, not just technique, but system. So we use that. It's and then I've been doing Kyokushin, and that's also my latest passion. I've been able to explore that more now during the pandemic, because of the kata and all the solo training. But yeah, and judo is now part of my repertoire. I try to do judo once a week, and but yeah, I've been obsessed with the combat side of things for the last 10 years.
Wow. And the fact that you're a second straight brown belt in BJJ is an amazing accomplishment, man. Wow.
You know, I keep trying to say I was going to be a black belt at 30. I wanted to be a black belt at 35. I wanted to be a black belt, but it is what it is. I mean, I know you've trained before. You can't rush these things. You can't make these things happen. It's just, it is when it is. And, but I'm going to keep grinding for a long time to come. So,
it's interesting because for me, I had a bunch of injuries from Kung Fu too. And part of it is just, I think, at first I was really harsh on Kung Fu's training methods, but I think it's more just that, one, martial arts, combat sports, etc., has evolved so much that people have been understanding the importance of like keeping your body in balance and stuff like that. Because, you know, in jiu-jitsu, there's so many people walking around with so many injuries that could be prevented or corrected too. So it's not Kung Fu specific. And part of sort of my martial arts journey was knowing so many jiu-jitsu people and like easily fixable but not fixed kind of body weaknesses they have. I'm like, okay, it's just a general thing that a lot of combat athletes have because we're so busy training, we don't understand the body, one, needs to heal, but two, even more than heal, it needs to balance. And in jiu-jitsu, you're always like this, you know, it imbalances your upper back and balances the backside. And in Kung Fu, you're always throwing kicks and stuff without understanding stabilizers and stuff like that. And again, training's different at different schools. But one of my coaches, he started out in Taekwondo, moved to Kyokushin like you did. And then, you know, he started doing American kickboxing and Muay Thai. But some of the drills we do before we start our Muay Thai training are still very based in like Taekwondo and stuff. And a lot of what we did was just work on your stabilizer muscles because you can't just have the explosivity and the big muscles. You need the smaller muscles too to, you know, really move your joints in a very kind of controlled way throughout the motion. And so one of the things I've been doing most of last year and this year is just I've been just building up stabilizer muscles around my glutes because that was my problem area. It'll always hurt. It'll make me angry, and it doesn't hurt anymore. I don't do that straight kick all the way up high like in Kung Fu, but I do roundhouse kicks and axe kicks and, you know, spin kicks, and I even got the courage to throw side kicks now because side kicks would always give my glutes problems back in the day in Kung Fu. So so much of the injury in general, not just in Kung Fu but in martial arts in general, can be prevented. It just, unfortunately, there's like a lack of knowledge between the medical people and the people actually like training, and there's got to be a way to bridge. So that's my little rant for this.
I agree, and I'm guilty of that. But it's also, I think it's the mindset of the combat athlete too. Like, if I'm not limping around, I don't feel like I did anything. If I don't have, I'll be, you know, check my ribs at night, and if they're not sore from, you know, body conditioning, I feel like, did I really do anything today? And it's not the right mindset, but that is, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm not, I just feel like that's just part of that maybe that old school mentality. I know there's a lot of, you know, I think with so much money in MMA right now, obviously I'm sure other combat sports for a long time have been savvy to it, but, you know, you see a lot of people talking about overtraining and, you know, doing a lot of different sophisticated stuff to stay in top condition. But, you know, I think for an average Joe turned savage Joe, it's mostly like, are you training at all? Like, are you lifting weights? Are you going to jiu-jitsu? Are you going to your boxing gym or not? And we don't have a lot of extra time or maybe even mental energy to devote to some of those things, which if you did, as you know, you'd probably get paid back on you get a lot of return on investment. But
yeah, I like what you said. Average Joe to Savage Joe. That's such a fun.
Dude, bro. That's my new thing. I thought that should be my handle this morning. I was thinking about it. I was like, I just love, because I'm not a professional athlete. You know, I don't get to claim some of those pedigree. You know, but I do get to train with a bunch of killers every day, and those killers I respect because they're just savage Joes. They're just the cop who works all, you know, he's just getting off his shift and he's coming in, he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, or single mom, makes it to kickboxing 3 days a week, spars every guy in the gym. You know, like I have a huge amount of respect as an amateur martial arts instructor, you know, or a coach of amateur martial artists, to just see how many people who work full time and have families to take care of. And I think they're the savage Joes. They're the average guy who comes into the gym, who throws down on a, you know, weekly basis, weekend warriors. And I think they deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lucas, what is your day-to-day like? Is it half teaching, half training, a quarter teaching, 3/4 training? Tell me about that.
It's about 1/3 training, 2/3 teaching. It depends on the day, but I train 2 to 3 hours a day, and usually 2 hours a day. And I teach usually about 4 hours a day, maybe, no, usually a little bit more than that, usually 5 hours a day. So that's about average, 2 to 3 hours of training and 5 hours of coaching.
I see. And is your coaching mostly Kung Fu sports, or do you coach other stuff too?
Yep. Basically, I only coach, I teach Tai Chi a couple of days a week. And I've done that with so I came back and opened up CMAA, and with my instructor from when I was in high school. He's still out of school and he just teaches Tai Chi. And so I've learned Tai Chi with him over the last 10 years. And it's, I love the people, and the movement feels really nice. And I do a lot of Qigong actually. But I just approach it like yoga, you know, my approach is just movement. So not too much internal energy and chi stimulation. I let my teacher handle that type of talk. For me, I just look at posture and breath. And so I do that a couple hours a week, and then primarily we're a Kung Fu program, and we do, you know, kids ages 5 and older to adults. And then 3 days a week we have Sanda, which, you know, again, we just infuse mostly the Bang Muay Thai system and some takedowns I've learned over the last 10 years, and use Sanda rules. And what else? Then we have JKD at the school, but I don't teach that class, and I try to take it when I can, but ever since I've been married with a son, I try to get home, you know, and be with them more often than not. So it's mostly, I try to stick to my repertoire. Starting next month, it may be next month, but starting soon, we're going to be a Kyokushin sort of affiliate with my instructor, my instructor's like 90 minutes away from me. So he and I train mostly on Zoom, and I got good training partners that I get to train with during the, you know, I got all my kickboxing guys. So we meet in the mornings and we do Kyokushin together. So we do our body conditioning and our sparring. And then I get with my instructor and he'll give me more drills to work with them. And so in about a month or so, we'll be having him teach through Zoom, broadcast at the Academy live. So one of these cool silver linings that just happened to come through because of the pandemic. And so that's kind of a personal project. That's not going to be maybe I won't say it won't be, but that's not, the plan is not to become a Kyokushin, school. And I think CMAA is my baby, but it's a fun project that he and I are working on, and we're doing it every week anyway. So we figured, why not do it at the Academy and open the doors to other people interested in learning.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned you have a son. Now, how old is your son?
Yeah, my son's 2.5. Basically, I won't belabor any talking about family, but I'm very, very lucky. I got a beautiful wife and very, very smart, beautiful in every way. And then my son's 2.5, and we're looking to grow the family. And
Wow.
he's a beautiful little guy too.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Ah.
they're teaching me how to be less selfish. And I look at them; they're my, martial arts is my life. But I think at the end of the day, I'm glad they're in it, because I think no matter what happens with martial arts, I think with them around, I know I won't have any regrets,
Yeah.
about life in general. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Have you talked to your wife about whether you want your son to become a martial arts person?
yeah. Basically, that's my goal. I've already structured his training. He'll be training at the Olympic Judo Center, starting at age 3, and training with me every day and doing wrestling. We got a great wrestling spot. Locally, we got a bunch of good stuff locally, so we're very fortunate. And of course, this is all fantasy. She's on board with it. She works full time, and basically, she works 9 to 5 full time, and I work 5 to 9 full time.
Mm-hmm.
So she's gonna, we're both on board with having the kid with me, in the evenings to help free up some of her time.
Mm-hmm.
So she's really on board. She's Chinese, and she loves Chinese martial arts, and she entertains me with that. So, my basic goal is to have him fall in love and train and become a martial artist and go as far with this as he wants to go. But I also have no delusions that, he won't resist. So, basically, we're going to teamwork and try to make it his thing. But, I'm also not, I don't have any, it's mostly fantasy, and I recognize that. And I appreciate my parents letting me pursue martial arts, and I will definitely allow him to make his own decision when the time is right. So if when the day comes and he's old enough to say in sincerity that he won't pursue it, I'll let him, pursue something else. But until then, I'm going to use every trick in the book to keep him happy in the gym, training hard. So whether that's bribery or, punishment, or he's going to get it every which way to make sure he stays, in the gym for as long as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And either way, he'll get to learn how to defend himself. So that's always an extra incentive.
I think it's a huge thing. I was never bullied, but my goal is to make damn sure that my child is, equipped with a realistic expectation and ability to protect himself, and in that have confidence to go out and live life, the way he wants to. I don't want my kid to ever be afraid to speak up and answer a question in class because he's worried that someone's going to call him a nerd or, knock the books out of his hand, or, and I think that goes to a lot of different ways, because the confidence you get from being, because you don't have the fear of physical threat is real.
Yeah.
And so I do want to make sure, especially I'm a honky, I'm a cracker, and my kid is mixed, and I don't know anything about what it's like to not be white in America, but I want to make sure that my son has full confidence in who he is.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a noble thing, because it's usually I grew up as an Asian kid, kind of with very diverse friends, right? But I've had the benefit of always living in areas that was very diverse. So I don't know what it would feel like, let's say, if you were a non-white person living in with only white people or only black people or only Hispanic people. So I don't have that experience either. So, I'm not one to kind of like judge other people or like interpret other people who like really say that, there's a lot of racism or there's a lot of whatever in this country, because I haven't seen it, because I've had the privilege and the blessing of living in a specific type of very tolerant type of, diverse place in America, lots of different cities that were basically the same. So it's great to think ahead about that, because like you said, unfortunately, bullying does happen, and unfortunately not every family's perfect. So it's like that stuff will spill out into school, and your kid being a martial artist will be able to, one, handle it, but maybe also protect other kids if his friends or something get messed with by whoever.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important. Obviously, again, I didn't have that experience of being bullied and beating up the bullies and getting back at the, so that's not in my, but I think it's important to, again, working with kids and seeing it firsthand that the kids have that confidence, and that confidence comes through from achievement in many different disciplines. I believe that, but I think it's most real when it is in combat sport. Because I mean, you can be the world's greatest gymnast and be, or the world's greatest flute player, and be full of confidence, and everyone's telling you how great you are. But the second somebody gets in your face and physically threatens you, I think that your confidence level may change in that circumstance.
Yeah.
So certain types of confidence are maybe relegated to their own realms.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that too, because the other side of the coin, which I'm sure you've seen too, is that people who don't know how to fight, people who don't train, also are sometimes the most blindly confident when it comes to physical confrontations. Or
I see it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I work with kids and adults, and literally today I had an experience, and the guy who's like the white belt in the gym is, I'm gonna kick your ass, coach, and puts the mouthpiece in, and you're just like, so clueless. It's not gonna go down like that. But they just don't know. They they think it's a movie, and they're but I see it with kids too. They say, oh, they'll start arguing with the kid in class, and they're gonna say, oh, you do the kickboxing class, and I'll fight you today. And I tell all the kids, if they're arguing, to just do the kickboxing class and fight. I put them on the spot. I say, if you're going to talk like that, we got a class for it. Put your gloves on and be about it, or stop, barking.
Yeah, exactly.
And but it's always the kid, who doesn't have any experience, who thinks they're just going to get in there, and they always want to hit somebody else or hurt somebody else, and I'm like, you realize that kid's going to fight back, right? That kid's going to punch you back. It's not going to be one-sided. Like, you're the one that doesn't have the experience, but they always think about how they're going to win. I'm like, the other guy's planning to do the exact same thing, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons, after many years, I was glad I stopped my Wushu training, because it gave me a lot of false confidence. I got into fights all the time. And the thing is, because you had some of that athleticism from Wushu, you still fought better than the common person who didn't know how to fight.
Sure.
But the risk is when you meet someone who knows how to fight, right? And I had one incident like that. Thank goodness it didn't escalate too much, but the kid trained in boxing or something, because I never saw any of the punches he swung at me, and he connected with every single one of those punches. And,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I had the opposite experience where I was in high school, and there was a big thing going on, and all these kids were going to get into this big fight, and everybody was mean mugging. And I had supreme confidence because of my Kung Fu training, and they were all afraid of me. And I just look back and think, I would have been smoked. I wouldn't have had a clue. These kids were, regular, kids who had been in a couple of school fights. And I was like, man, I would have gotten destroyed. I had no idea how helpless I would have been.
Yeah. It is kind of two sides of the coin, right? Because I've had sort of some of the same stories as you in high school, because in high school, by that time, I already stopped training Wushu. But I still had a little bit of confidence, because I've been in so many fights as a kid where most people didn't mess with me, right? And so I understand that side too. And I actually knew a guy who he trained at a rival school to the school we trained at, and the guy was like me in middle school, just like always like way too gung-ho about his Kung Fu. And I remember one time, and I talked about this on my channel, one time I saw him get into a fight, and he didn't know how to throw with the right leverage, and he got tangled up, and then he tried to justify it. Oh, I actually tried to let him go, but he got me when I let him go. It was like, and I was like, wow, that could have been me in high school. Good thing I'm not like that, because the guy just like he had such false supreme confidence, and he ended up going to a community college because he didn't try hard in school but thought he could go to Harvard, so he only applied to Harvard. That would have been me in high school if I kept this training dance Fu, but not understanding that wasn't real combat sports, that wasn't real fighting.
Yeah. I have a couple of experiences in China where coaches would throw down and clubs, and they had no clue what they were doing. It was. Average Joe. It was, yeah. So I've seen it
let's
firsthand.
hear some of those, man. We have to tell some of them.
I got so many crazy stories. So basically, I loved when I lived in China. I just lived in all these different places, and some places I was cool with the athletes. Most places I was actually cooler with the coaches. You know, retired professional athlete was probably like 24 to 34 years old, and I was kind of the exception. I'm not a professional student so anyway, a lot of times I would just go out and hang out with the coaches and drink. And I had a super wild card coach in Beijing we did all sorts of crazy stuff. And basically everywhere I went, I would get into a lot of trouble. But, I mean, you think we did it, but, yeah, well, I mean, there's been times where we were drinking at clubs, and all of a sudden I see my coach over across the way. Someone pushes somebody, someone throws a bottle, smashes against the wall, and then I'm like, rushing into action, but not in any condition to actually be in action, like kind of, going in slow motion across just to see my coach get blasted down a staircase. And, we get outside, there's glass in his face. We get in the car, get back to my place to try to clean him up some. And first thing he says to me was, "You see me get kicked down that staircase?" I said, "Yeah, man, that was wild." He goes, "I didn't feel a thing. I was a decon champion." And so the following couple of days later, I was hanging out with some friends who knew him, and I told them the story, and they said, "Hey, I started telling them the story, and they said, same thing happened with me. One time we were at a club, started a fight. The guy got kicked down a flight of stairs." I was like, "Really?" They were like, "Yeah." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, as soon as he got up, he just said, didn't even feel it. I was a deton champion." So that kind of became a running theme. Like, how many times has this guy been kicked down a flight of stairs?
Yeah, exactly. Got him beat up, but used his powers of no nerve endings anymore to justify it.
No, just. But yeah, in Shandong, I trained with the team there, and one time we were at an internet cafe, just chilling on the computers, everybody smoking, playing games, and I'm just sending emails, and then some guy says something to somebody. Next thing I know, one of my guys got up, walks out, comes back in the door with like 6 other guys from the team, and they just throw down. And again, nobody looked like they had a clue how to fight, just slapping and kicking, and every basically it looked like, you would never guess that they're professional martial artists. But yeah.
Wow.
But so, again, talking about your friend having done, this guy you knew in high school training and having that false sense of confidence. I witnessed it firsthand, guys at the professional level. Total false confidence.
Wow, that's crazy. And it reminds me of times where, I started Kung Fu in America, and then I went back to China for 2 years. Those 2 years, 2.5 years in China was like supreme false confidence, Jerry, man, because none of my classmates trained in anything. Like Taekwondo got really big in China, but after I left, Taekwondo started getting really big in China in the 2000s, right? But I was in China in the 90s. So I was the only kid in the Shaolin Gong to really train. And so I had the most supreme confidence. I got it to fight so much, man. When I came back to America, I thank goodness I was a smart kid. I saw that how those kids threw it down, especially some of the kids in the hood. I saw that they could throw, and I'm like, I don't think I could beat them. So I would never pick fights with them. And I remember one time, this is a funny story I've never told before, but this more hood kid was fighting one of my, I wouldn't even call him a friend, but he was Asian, so I consider him my friend because I had that tribalism. And he was just beating him up. And I stepped in like, "Okay, you want to go? And the kid swung a jab at me. It missed me, but it set up for a body shot, and he was aiming at my liver, but he missed my liver, and he hit me in the pelvis, and it hurt my pelvis so much. But actually, thinking about it all these years later, because I spar all the time, I know if you hit someone in the pelvis at the wrong age, you're going to hurt yourself more. So even though I hurt a lot and I've never been hit in the pelvis, he stopped hitting me after that. It was because he probably hurt his fist.
Yeah. So I punch people in the pelvis, and I've been hit in the pelvis because a lot of times guys go for that body shot, but they don't realize your hip's a little bit higher. and oh, it hurts so bad.
It hurts so much. And so for many years, I thought back on that incident. I was like, oh, wow, that guy was fast. But I didn't think about the other side, which is he probably hurt his fist hitting my pelvis. It's just, I wasn't conditioned. I wasn't used to getting hit in the pelvis. For me, I'm like, oh, did he kill me? But in his mind, he's like, ooh, ow, this guy's bone, ow. That's why he stopped hitting me. Like, it was literally just like that. And it was like, he stopped hitting me. And then I was like, why did he stop hitting me?
I at first I started doing Kyokushin, no gloves on, and I was like, I just want to have that toughness. And I would punch elbows. I once threw a punch, and the guy lifted his leg to check, and I just punched his knee and hip, and man, my hands were so mangled at first. So now, of course, I wear MMA gloves when I spar Kyokushin, because hitting that stuff is it destroys your hands. For sure. Even if you're conditioned to destroy your hands.
Even if you're conditioned, like I have to work out my wrists all the time because I try my best sometimes to not wear the gloves just to remember, because in a fight you don't have your gloves in your hands like this. You know, you have to remember sometimes, and it actually makes you remember not to get into fights because you're like, wow, it's so easy to damage your hands. There's a million bones on the hands.
Right. I noticed the same thing because I was kickboxing for a while, and then I would never train on my bag without wraps on or gloves on. And then when I started focusing on Kyokushin, I started training more on my bag without, those gloves on. Man, at first it was so much harder. But I find the hard part about Kyokushin was not just throwing bare knuckle, but hitting things when you're not expecting. So you throw a body punch and then leg lifts and you hit the knee. You just basically set up to punch a bag, and then a foot and a half in front of the bag before you're expecting contact, you hit a bowling ball. It's like you just you're not even braced for impact.
Exactly. Like your muscles haven't even tightened to the point
you're not even expecting to make impact. So I think that it is totally different, but I think it's an important difference, and that's why that's one of the reasons I love Kyokushin, is because you have to think about your hands and what you're doing, and I love the fact that they can legitimately use some of those Kung Fu style,
exactly.
But they'll do them, and I think it's cool because. I mean, we can't do that in Sanda or most styles, and most times I'd say it's probably not effective. But in Kyokushin, because they do train bare knuckle and they do have those, they can think about doing that stuff. And man, it's cool. It just shows you that stuff from Kung Fu that it exists in Kung Fu, but we don't usually have an outlet for it. There's an outlet in Kyokushin, and those guys do that exact same stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And just to finish my story, just the final thought was that. Thank goodness I never really started fights with the kids who I knew could fight, but I always had this I still had a false confidence even those first few years in America after training in China, which was but if I catch them right with the right kick, that's always how my thought was. If I catch them with a kick, because these kids in the hood never kicked, right? At least in the 2000s. Now they probably do because of MMA and stuff like that. But back, I was like, oh, my advantage is my kicks. So that always gave me more confidence than I probably should. But again, a lot of confidence is you don't have to that goes into psychology. But as much as those hood kids scared me, I never showed it because I'm like, okay, if we really have to scrap, you might beat me up, but I'll kick you once or twice in the face and you're going to feel it. That's how I always felt. So I was never too intimidated by the hood kids, even though I probably should have been because I didn't know how to fight at all.
Absolutely. I hear you. I was just thinking about something, but it is wild. And I do think that that's where combat sports can give people real, a greater sense of reality in that sense. Self-awareness, there's no illusion or fantasy. Even in Kung Fu, I see it all the time, myself all the time. I do a form and I think I look one way and I watch the video and I realize I don't look that way. It's not real. But you don't get that feedback as easily as you do in combat sports.
I just recorded myself yesterday sparring and I looked horrible. I love these reality checks. There's 2 reality checks in combat sports, right? Whereas in Kung Fu, there's in Kung Fu, there's in Tao Lu stuff, Kung Fu, there's maybe 2 reality checks. One is how you look to the external, and 2 is how you feel, right? You said in your story, sometimes how you feel is not exactly how you look. Now, in combat sports, you add a third thing, which is not only how you look, how you feel, but also getting hit, right? Getting hit is a very good kind of reality check. And, getting hit, it's why is he hitting me? What am I doing wrong? Oh, sometimes my hand leaves, stuff like that. Or, oh, my head movement's janky because I'm like this instead of like this, stuff like that. And yeah, that is a good reality check. And very few people don't get hit when they
Right.
spar. So like when you get hit, you're kind of like, and even if it's light sparring, you're still getting tapped, and you're like, wow, this could really hurt me. It's
Yeah,
really humbling.
I agree that it's that's why I want to focus on striking a little bit more these days. I love grappling, and I think it's so scientific and it's so methodical. And I know striking can be too, but I feel like, you know, if you've grappled for a while, you can basically be untouchable, you know, to the average person. And I know that exists within striking, but I feel like it's when average guy comes into my gym, if he's aggressive, they're hard. I don't care. I mean, again, I'm not a professional striker and I don't have that kind of a background. So I'm sure, you know, legit guys can handle beginners and just as easily as legit grapplers can. But in my experience, you know, if a guy's aggressive and he throws with power, you have to be cautious and you have to be, you know what I mean? It's very different than when you're doing jiu-jitsu and the guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, we can play this game really slowly. You don't understand, you know, submission holds. You don't know escapes from submission holds. And the gi is just a totally, you know, foreign object for them. They don't understand how to manipulate and utilize it yet. But man, everybody can swing, and you zig when you should have zagged, and it's easy to get caught. I do think so. That's one of the reasons why I thought about focusing purely on grappling. And as a martial artist, I just couldn't do it. I really wanted to make sure I was, you know, had some strike training and some legitimate training in striking.
Yeah. And you mentioned another thing, which I think is a fallacy that a lot of grapplers feel, because they feel like their grappling can help them in every situation, which 99% of the time is true. But if, like you said, if the guy just gets a lucky shot on you, or if the guy has a knife,
a lucky shot, I feel like if you're like, I know a lot of these guys in grappling, and the reality is if a guy just throws punches at him, it's gonna, you know what I mean? Especially in jiu-jitsu, I love jiu-jitsu. It's my primary art of personal practice the last 10 years, you know. And one, we're not great at takedowns. Two, we're not great at, you know, at jiu-jitsu specifically, at least my academy, which I believe is a good jiu-jitsu academy. I've been in a lot of different places, and we don't do any takedowns with striking, which is why I love Sanda. I feel like every jiu-jitsu guy should be in a Sanda class, because you're going to have to learn how to do takedowns against guys who are trying to strike. I do think that they're, you know, again, jiu-jitsu is a beautiful, beautiful art, and it's a very powerful system and, you know, style. But I do think there are limitations for the average practitioner. And I do think that they don't realize that when people are throwing on them, it's going to be very different. And it's, if you don't have the ability to take strikers down, you're going to be in a different world.
Yeah. Even doing jiu-jitsu, sometimes you accidentally eat a flailing arm or eat a knee or something. You're like, right? That's exactly what's going to happen if you're a grappler who doesn't train with strikes.
Sure. And, you know, we all get hit more easily in jiu-jitsu because we're not expecting to get hit. So, you know, you'll eat knees when guys are trying to, you know, switch positions or run north-south and, you know, whatever, you're trying to escape and you just get cracked. So I think we get hit more often because we're not defending it. But yeah, dude, you mean I'll go for a takedown and just eat a knee to the chest because the guy leans back and, you know, like you just get rocked in the sternum. And that's very real. Like, you know, I mean.
Yeah. One thing I remember, one time I was learning takedowns, and sometimes when people are breaking fall, unintentionally, they'll hit the back of your head or hit your neck, man. Like they'll basically accidentally rabbit punch you or rabbit slap you. Like these are things people don't think about.
The thing is, I agree. All that happens, and I think in jiu-jitsu it happens so often because we're not expecting it just happening. It's just the reality of chaos. And so I'll always hear people say something like, because I straddle both worlds in a weird way. I'm not a traditional martial artist, meaning I've only done sport martial arts for the most part, meaning Wushu, modern Wushu, jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? Not like Goju Ryu or Wing Chun or something that's a traditional system. But I because of my Kung Fu orientation, I kind of have a lot of I cross paths with a lot of people in the traditional martial arts community, and it always bothers me. They're like, oh, I would poke you in the eye, kick you in the groin, or that I would do that to somebody. And I'm like, dude, do you realize how many times a week I get accidentally poked in the eye,
Yeah,
hit in the groin? And guess what? When the fight is on, we don't stop. You know what I mean? Like, you shoot for a takedown and a guy sticks your eye and you're fighting the single leg, or you get kneed in the face or elbowed in the jaw. And I mean, unless there's some awareness of it and it's overt, your partner might check in on you, but oftentimes they don't even know what just happened.
Yeah.
I mean, so I feel like a lot of that fantasy is it's not entirely true, because a lot of times we are getting hit in the eyes and the fish hooked by whatever it is. You just get caught with all this wild stuff because it's accidental.
Yeah,
and
especially
it doesn't really. Yeah,
especially with groin hits, man. I definitely I don't get hit in the groin all the time, but it happens. Yeah. And I'd be surprised after a few times you do. It's not like you get used to it, but you're like, okay, it happened. So like you don't just go, oh, like they think everybody thinks, oh, you just be like, oh, you might be like, ow, and then okay, let's go. Or you might hit them and you're like, oh, sorry, that's all. Yeah. But that's all. Yeah. It's not like what people think, like, oh, okay, give up.
Exactly. If you have like a full on, maybe, nut shot or something, but I think, like people get tagged and clipped and nothing's easy to score anyway. Like, if you're used to having a guy throw an inside leg kick on you 100 times, maybe not 100 times, but maybe 10 times per round, and you're doing several rounds of class and several classes per week, you know what it's like to have a guy try to stick his foot between your legs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the difference between that inside leg kick and your groin shot is not too significant. You're used to having people try to kick between your legs.
Yeah, exactly.
I always hear people talk about that. Like, I poke you in the eye, and I'm like, the average boxer, guess what? They're getting people putting their hands in their face all day long. They know how to move their head and cover up and parry. Like, it's not going to be easy to just touch somebody in the face with your hand.
Yeah. And another flip side of that is the average boxer does get hit in the eye a lot. So he knows how to fight through it, even if he gets hit, because there's something called a detached retina. A detached retina happens because the boxer gets hit like thousands of times, if not tens of thousands of times in the eye, right? A detached retina doesn't just happen if you get hit once or even 100 times. It's like there's a reason a boxer gets a detached retina, is because in his practice of sparring, he's getting hit in the eye all the time. So yes, one poke in the eye, yes, that's gonna save you.
And that's the thing is, like, it can happen, but the reality is it probably happens all the time in professional fighting and amateur fighting and in the gym on a routine basis. And it can it has the capacity to do some serious damage and to stop the fight, but more often than not, I think if a guy has determination, it's going to be pretty hard. It's not just going to be one and done.
Yeah. And thinking along that line too. See, you and I, we've been hit in the eye enough. We've learned to fight through it. But then there is a possibility if it's just some random punk who's never been hit in the eye. But then again, usually someone that's challenging you on the street probably has gotten into fights, right? So like your capacity to use it on someone who's never been hit in the eye to disable them, there's a very small segment of the population that you could do it on, and they're probably not the ones you're getting into fights with at the bar or like getting into fights with on the street.
Right.
Yeah. So I think this would naturally segue into a really good last part of the conversation, which is how else do you think kind of traditional martial arts or even your specialty Kung Fu can sort of be, I don't want to use the word modernized, but it is the right word. How can we make it so, these Chi masters, these Wing Chun masters who claim all these lineages aren't getting beat up all the time in China, like how, or like even close at home, how can we make it so a guy like Jerry doesn't grow up all disillusioned and realize he can't fight, and he was only lucky that most of his fights he got into, he won,
Yeah. I think that this has to be approached in a couple of different ways, because it's kind of I do think that martial arts can be practiced for many different reasons. And they don't have to, there are many benefits to martial arts. Like, for example, the obvious one is maybe I teach an 80-year-old lady Tai Chi. Do I have to make sure that she doesn't have a false sense of security and can actually use her art to fight? If that's not her goal, then I don't think so. You're muted right now, I don't know if you did that on
Yeah, I
purpose,
know
but
because the building next to us always does these like trash things. It's like, yeah, so that's why I'm muting myself. So
gotcha. Just checking. Okay. So I do think it's important, like for basically, so two things. One, again, not being a traditional kung fu guy, I know I'll get destroyed by that community if I try to talk to it too much. But so just but to touch on the subject, two things. I think one, what's the goal of the practitioner? And coaches need to be honest with their students. And like for example, when I hear somebody talk about, oh, kung fu is really not a dance, it's really for fighting, and because we hear this all the time, and I have to tell my student, you're absolutely right, but there's a difference between Taolu, our forms, and Sanda, which is our fighting class. And if you want to, I said they're two sides of the same coin, but one is going to focus and prepare you for combat. So I do think it's important that coaches be honest with their students. I don't tell grandma that she's going to learn how to defend herself through Tai Chi. I'll definitely explain that it's a traditional martial art and that it has combat applications, but that our focus is maybe primarily for health and wellness, or whatever it may be. But I think that's the first thing, is to be honest, about what it is you're doing. Be honest with yourself, be honest with your students. Number two, to make it more practical, you have to spar, period. And I don't think it's any mystery. That's the only thing you have to do, is introduce sparring. And again, it can be different rule sets. There's all sorts of rule sets that can be approached and made practical in their own way. But I think that has to happen if you need it, or you want it to be practical. And I think Kyokushin is a great example. I was drawn to it because it has traditional kata. It has, like I do kata competitions online just for fun right now, because that's what's available. And I don't love form anymore, or right now, but I do think long term, I want to continue to explore it and try to better understand it. But I love the fact that they have form, traditional form, and they have fighting. And those are not conflicting. Nobody in that community, or not nobody, but I won't say nobody, but I think for the most part, many people in that community accept that there's these two practices. You have Kihon, your basics, Kata, and Kumite. So you have the 3Ks, and I think Kung Fu really focuses on basics and forms, but often, I think we avoid free sparring, and that's the key to actually having any practical value.
And adding on to your first point, I remember one of the schools I trained at before I started training with you at Ome. I remember that other school, one of the he taught like the kid classes. We were doing butterflies, and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, imagine." And because he was trying to correct people's butterflies, he's like, "Yeah, imagine if you're gonna like kick people like this behind your back. How are you gonna do it?" And even then, as like an 11-year-old, I'm like, there is no freaking way I'm gonna kick someone with a butterfly kick, especially both of the feet hitting him in the face. There's no way. Even if you hit him with one of which you probably won't, he's gonna react. He's probably gonna fall or something. You're not gonna hit him with both. So exactly, honesty, man. As a coach, you need to be honest. Like if you're training him how to dance, don't tell him, oh yeah, this is going to teach you how to fight. It might make it slightly easier to adjust to Sanda or boxing, but it still doesn't teach you how to fight.
Right. I agree 100%. It's not, I always tell my students, they want to know, would this help me? Even adults come in, they're doing my kickboxing class, and they want to know, should I do Kung Fu too? Mm-hmm. And I tell them, it will help you. But there is a cost benefit analysis you have to do. How much time and energy do you want to invest in this, and what are your goals? But if your goals are just to explore martial arts in their totality, and you always wanted to learn how to swing a sword, then yes, will learning how to do front stretch kicks and inside outside and all that stuff, butterfly kicks, help you fight. It won't hurt, but it's not, your time may be better spent showing up, cross training or focusing purely on a certain, modality.
Yeah. I will say, if people do get really good at Wushu, the Taolu part of Wushu, one thing you could do is train some capoeira. and then like that's like a step to kind of adapting it. And then from capoeira, maybe take kickboxing because like capoeira they do a lot of the same cool dancey stuff, but it's slightly more into combat.
I think of I know it's a weird way to think about it, but I think of Wushu as my gateway drug for kids. You know, like I'm like, hey, you're 6 years old and you want to be a super ninja? If I put you in a headlock and hold you on the ground, you're probably not coming back. If I give you a sword and show you how to do a backflip with it, you'll probably say, this is exactly what a super ninja does.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to have them identify as being a super ninja and just being like, I'm a martial artist. I swing swords. I do flips. I focus on my splits. I can do, you know, and then I feel like, good, by the time you're 8 years old, maybe in my program, you could start sparring anytime, obviously. But in my school, we start at age 8. And we've got kids who are a little younger, but they've got background in Kung Fu already. And I kind of know I can work with them. But, you know, like I feel like then 8 years old, you start sparring. And then by 13, we got class a couple of days a week for you for sparring. And I hope that, and I've seen it happen where kids come in young, you know, 11 years old, and they'll start doing Kung Fu forms. And by the time they're 16, they've got their black belt and they're really interested in sparring. And it just gives them an avenue to say, like, I've already done Kung Fu for a long time. I'm not as interested in it anymore. But sparring is really fun, and I like wrestling now. And they, you know, and I've seen it happen so many times. Boys get to high school, and all of a sudden they've been in Kung Fu for 4 to 8 years, and all of a sudden their focus shifts to Sanda, and I'm like, perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to have happen. Is just have you segue to that other art. And I figure stick with that, and by the time you go off to college, you're a martial artist in your own right.
Yeah, and I will say, giving credit, because my Kung Fu training in China was pretty good, as much as it was mostly dance and compliance drills, but still it was really good. And I actually went back to the Shaolin last year, or technically it's 2 years, 2 years ago, so 2019. And I talked to them about all this, and they're like, yeah, they basically said exactly what Shifu Lucas said. So guys, what he said, re-listen to that. Just from a coaching angle, they said, look, if you stayed here in China, we would have eventually had you go into Sanda. So like the Chinese way of training like functional Kung Fu seems to be get them hooked, like he said, the gateway drug with the Wushu stuff. Right. And when they get to the time where it looks like they're a little bit more uncontrolled or something, like, you know, which Jerry had for many years, then you put them in Sanda. So like that's exactly how they would, like, there's legit Kung Fu in China. There's legit Sanda. Sanda is very good in China, right? So like that's how they put the kids into Sanda. It's hard to tell a 4-year-old to get punched in the face, right? So you might put him in Taolu for a little bit until he seems ready.
Right. You know, and again, there's other ways of doing it, but like again, I've contemplated making the class include Sanda in their curriculum. Right now, they're 2 separate programs, and I've thought about overlapping them, but I feel like it's not the sport of Wushu. The sport of Wushu, they are 2 separate formats. You know what I mean? Like, I believe it should be offered at the same school if the instructor is qualified, because a lot of instructors are not qualified. And you know what I mean? I get that. Not everybody who's trained for 10 years in Wushu should be teaching kickboxing or might feel comfortable like that. But I didn't like the idea of trying to put it together. So I'm very conflicted. Sometimes I think I should, and sometimes I think I should just keep it separate and just say, we have Wushu for Wushu athletes, we have Sanda for Sanda athletes. And if you're not a professional, which none of you guys are, if you have the interest, you can cross train.
And you bring up a good point. It really is, like, how much of the same thing are they, right? Should they be really separate? So that it's something that I probably should do some thinking too, because I haven't really thought about this. But you know, a lot of Taolu Wushu stuff is like very dancey. Like in Kyokushin and forms of karate, you could argue some of those moves in their katas can be translated more directly into fighting. But like the Taolu, most of the Taolu in Kung Fu is like so aestheticized. I don't know if that the right word is. It's very hard you have to really sit down and have combat experience to think about how you can adapt it into Kung Fu. Right? I mean, into fighting.
I think it's I'm sure I'm in the minority, but I don't care. I think it's it would be a silly exercise to try to figure out how to apply all those movements.
Yeah,
I don't believe
agree.
in application. I see it in traditional stuff. I'm not convinced that that's the right mentality, that we have to look at a wheeling arm and figure out how to apply that in a fight. I think, again, you can train form and get benefit from it in certain ways that don't necessarily have to apply directly to combat.
Yeah.
I just think that Wushu is a beautiful sport, and it took traditional Kung Fu and said, we're going to make the forms more spectacular and we're going to make the fighting more spectacular.
Yeah.
The fighting was going to be, full on, full contact, punch, kick, throw, and the Wushu, the forms are going to have acrobatics and aesthetics, performance aesthetics. And I think just let the sport be that. Like, I don't think we have to fight it all the time and try to say, how can we make the forms more practical for fighting?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the purpose of the sport.
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
if you want it to be more practical, go into Sanda or supplement or complement your forms training. But I do think the forms are meant to be spectacular. That they should be for performance.
Yeah.
So that's my own personal thing. I know that there's a big movement that says we've gone too far and we've got to make them more practical again, but I disagree. I think the sport is sport and it's got a different purpose. It's
kind of like tricking or, stunts and stuff like that, right? Yeah. Nobody who's a stuntman or nobody who's a tricker in their right mind will say, yeah, I can fight. Right?
That's how I believe this is the practical.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's supposed to be spectacular. It's supposed to look fantastic.
Yeah.
It's supposed to. There's a reason why Kung Fu movies, they're flying across the rooftops, because it's more. It's its own thing.
Yeah.
There's other ways of making action movies. Yeah. There's other ways of demonstrating martial arts in a spectacular way. But this is how the Chinese culture chose to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool in its own way.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think we have to try to make it something that it's not. Personally, I think accept it for what it is versus pretend that it's something else. And I just that seems more sad to me. Sometimes I see this a lot in the traditional community and in the modern sport community, and they both keep trying to make something that is, in my opinion, that it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good things to think about, man. And it all comes down to honesty, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Just be honest. Like movie directors, even actors. Jet Li's really good at that, by the way. Jet Li would be the first one to say, dude, I can't beat anyone up. I'm just the guy who can like do cool stuff. Jet Li is so humble about that. And
so humble about
that's why I respect him a lot about that.
Me too. And I know some people think that's just him being humble. I think that's just him being humble and honest.
Yeah, humble and honest, exactly.
I remember that was like when he did that movie. I forgot what was it, Danny the Dog, one of those movies with with Tito Ortiz, and they were talking about
Cradle to the Grave.
Cradle to the Grave, and it was just like, man, he was honest about it, and I just feel like that's something that's missing in the community, obviously, and obviously that's been a big focus for the internet community and there's been a lot of exposure in the last couple of years, but I think all that stuff's good. I think you and I are probably on this similar page, and I know obviously you've covered a lot of it, and that's how I know about a lot of it, but it's definitely been in the forefront, and I don't have any issue with people being called out if they're being dishonest. But I just feel so frustrated hearing some of the traditional community talk sometimes. They're always quick to just say, well, he wasn't a real master. It's like, well, put your real master out there then, or otherwise stop saying, oh, that guy's Wing Chun got beat by Shichodong because he wasn't good at Wing Chun. Well, pick the good guy then. I don't know. Like, this is an ongoing experiment. It's been high visibility for the last 20 plus years, and whether these arts were something 100 years ago, that's one thing, but they're not being demonstrated in such a fashion, in modern history, during our lifetime at least.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of the other arguments is, we can't fight, we're good, we just choose not to or whatever. Well, it's like, if you at a certain point cannot demonstrate that it's effective and every representative gets beat, it's the honesty thing again. Maybe just say, maybe we can do it, but we're just not going to say we're the best fighting system, right? I think there's this honesty. You really have to be honest about it. Maybe you can, maybe you are the best fighting system, but if you're unwilling to demonstrate it, then just stop saying it. Because how are we going to know, right?
And I do think that, you know, I will give like traditional arts a lot of leeway. Not even traditional arts, even some modern arts like Kudo. I love that stuff. I watch that. I think it's such, I don't know, you know, there's a lot of cool styles out there. And I often ask myself, why aren't they translating to professional MMA? And sometimes I think it's because, unfortunately, they're not as cracked up as, you know, they claim to be or appear to be.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes I have to also, I also believe that the waters just aren't that deep for that art. So it's not that Wing Chun, again, just as a silly example, isn't as good as wrestling, but maybe there's not as many people doing Wing Chun as wrestling at that high of a competitive, you know, sport.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you had a couple 100,000 Wing Chun fighters all fighting full contact for lots of money, and they were all the you know, it was the sea was, you know, thick with killer sharks, all training in the system, you know, you might see that translation better. So maybe it's not necessarily the art, it's just that to be, you know, in that art right now, you can probably get by training a couple of days a week and really enjoy it. And, you know, whereas to be an NCAA Division I champ in wrestling, you have to, you know, it's a limited group of people, and you have to be born a certain way, and you have to have a super mindset that has been, you know, tested and weeded out all this, you know, stuff who weren't qualified to be fighting. Whereas that doesn't have, there's no weeding out in the traditional community, maybe. And not for bad or for good, just, you know, it is what it is. And so sometimes I wonder too, if maybe certain arts, just the art itself is fine, but the structure of it doesn't produce, you know, people of a certain caliber.
It's such a good point, like a sample size problem, because if someone is that athletic or that skilled at learning something body mechanics wise, there's more profitable things even beyond MMA, right? There's more profitable things. So like you said, maybe they'll play football, maybe they'll play basketball. They don't need 100%. To go into MMA. Yeah.
That I hear all the time, because I was into CrossFit for a while, and MMA, obviously I'm a big fan, but they talk about, you know, like, oh, he's the baddest man on the planet, or the strongest man on the planet. And I'm thinking, well, who's willing to get paid peanuts to do it?
Yeah.
Like, there's probably badder, stronger dudes in the NFL who are saying, you know what, I can throw this ball and get paid millions of dollars. No thanks to getting punched in the face all day, every day for $1,000 a fight.
Yeah. From my understanding, I think if John Jones had his life different, he probably would have been a football player. I think. I'm pretty sure.
Well, his brother's a football player.
Right? Exactly. His brother's a football player. So he totally could have been a football player.
Yeah.
That's why nobody can beat him. It's not just because of the picograms, but it's, you know, half because of the picograms, half because he's just athletic.
He's elite. He's an elite. He's a different specimen, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with that. You know, I don't think that's the only thing, but I think that's a big difference. And I think that, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, but sadly, you know, again, if you put all those guys into a super Wing Chun training modality, maybe they could do something with the art. But you know, I think that's part of it. Part of the equation, at least.
It's kind of like how that football player Wing Chun guy that I featured a long time ago, you know, his stuff isn't perfect, but hey, he was a football player that went into Wing Chun. His Wing Chun just looks different, right?
Yeah.
So you think about whoever is just built a certain way, they're gonna look a different way, and they're gonna interpret the sport differently. Another thought I had was, remember Herschel Walker went into MMA? You know, Herschel Walker just like beat everyone.
He's a freak. He's a super freak.
Yeah, and he was like old too when he went into MMA. But it's just like that shows the caliber of things.
Yeah. So I just heard a great talk the other day. There's a book called On Jiu-Jitsu, and they were talking about one of that. Like in so many sports or so many pursuits, there's like an ideal. But with jiu-jitsu specifically, they talked about like there's no real ideal jiu-jitsu. There's just variations, like guys got pressure game or top game, or guys got great bottom game, or, you know, rubber guard game, or a guy's got strong kimuras and he takes, you know, dominant positions and tries to pin and go for the, there's just so many different games that, like, there's no real ideal physique for, like if you've got long legs, okay, great. You might be good at triangles. Maybe you're like a Brock Lesnar looking dude. You're going to have a different type of game. You're not going to be playing rubber guard.
Yeah.
And so that it was like, I think like you said, like a football player doing Wing Chun might look different. And I don't know what Wing Chun would have to say about that, but I feel like at least, just having read something about that as it relates to jiu-jitsu, like, yeah, of course, everybody's game is going to look different.
Yeah. So maybe there's a way in the future as martial arts and combat sports get safer, but also more competitive and also more able to have an ROI, more able to make money. Maybe we'll see a cool, bigger talent pool in it. Like, imagine that as we start understanding the importance of like thick necks and like the importance of jaws and the importance of just training safely, and maybe as medical technology gets to the point where you get KO'd or whatever, and you can heal the brain within 2 years, like completely heal it within 2 years or something. Maybe then, and maybe not even 2 years, like 2 months. So maybe then it's like people will actually be getting into this sport that normally would have been like, I don't want to get long-term damage.
Well, until then, I'm glad they're not in it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just joking. The last thing I need is a freak athlete punching me in the face. But I know exactly what you're saying. It's so true. It would be so crazy to see what's potential, what the potential is, if you got like somebody on a certain athletic level involved. Yeah. But in the meantime, what's going to happen?
I will also say something from martial arts, especially if you do combat sports, but any martial arts that it gets you prone to injury. I think what it makes you realize also is if you train it right and also like let your body heal. So like, sometimes your body won't heal right if you don't like strengthen the right areas, right? But if you let your body heal, the body actually is very resilient. That's something I kind of learned because like I healed myself from all these injuries I thought would never heal. Like, so that's another reason I want to encourage people to do something sports related. Be smart about it, really study up on it. Don't just like take what a coach says or what's available. Like, really think about your body, how you feel. But the body is meant, like, we're meant to like climb mountains and hunt deer and stuff like that. Like, we're meant to be freaking lethal, crazy specimens. And our sedentary style makes us not able to do that. But there's a reason why the human body was built a certain way. We didn't survive, in the old days, like being like, oh, it hurts. Okay, let's not do it, right? We survived in the old days. It's like, okay, we need to feed ourselves. Let's go shoot that deer with a bow and arrow.
Oh, for sure. That was actually one of the funny things. So when I trained over in Beijing Sports University, I was training with the foreigners. There's like 3 tiers, and that's how I got to meet a bunch of like USA team guys who are also over there training, like Brandon Sugiyama, who's kind of remained big in the Wushu community. And one of the foreigners, so there was like French national athletes, English national athletes, American, and one of the English guys was always beat up, shoulders messed up, legs messed up, and he was supposed to be some strength and conditioning guru, like exercise science and blah, blah, blah. And we always, one day I asked him, I was like, man, if you know so much about strength and conditioning, why are you always busted up? And he's like, because the human body can fix itself. He's like, you can trash it all you want and it'll be fine. And now obviously, I just remember being blown away by the thought at the time, but this is the guy now. I don't know if you can see that. Like, wow. He's definitely knowledgeable. He definitely, applied it after Wushu and maybe got smarter about certain things. But I just thought it was such a funny sentiment, like, because I can destroy my body all I want, and it'll just come back. I thought so. Kind of on that note, of course you can be smart, but
you can be smart and it's a very similar note to your story. So, my neck got hurt, right? And last year I spent a lot of time fixing my neck, and thank goodness now it's a lot thicker when I flex it. But what my physical therapist told me is like, think about this. He said, "Look, Jerry, there are these people in these like wherever in America who basically drive these big trucks and slam them into each other." Right? Yeah. I don't know what they're called, but I've never been to one of those shows, but they look
like a monster truck rally.
Yeah, monster truck rallies. Yeah. So these people every week drive these big ass trucks into each other. And are their spines okay? Yes. right? Okay, so that's a blanket statement. Maybe some of them, their spines aren't okay, but they repeatedly go and for whatever money or entertainment purposes, drive huge trucks into each other. No matter how strong their necks are, no matter how much protection they have, there's gonna be a little bit of like a whiplash, right? But they're okay. So when he told me that, I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like the human body can get beat up and fix itself if you like do a lot of other things right.
Right. And on the flip side too, because I have a lot of people, because I said I'm the kind of mentality, I like to just be crushed all the time.
Yeah.
And everybody tells me, oh, you're going to be on a wheelchair when you're older, or your knees are going to be all bad. And I work with older people through Tai Chi, and guess what? They're all messed up, and it's not because they were overtraining. I think it's like wear out or rust out. The number one reason people go to see a doctor is for back pain. I don't know if that's true, but that's what everybody, that's like that common idea. And again, it's not because they're all deadlifting. It's probably because they're not deadlifting.
Yeah.
So the reality is I feel like, you get old, you got bad knees. You can get that from overtraining now, or you can get it from undertraining now. It's a fine line, but I'm going to err on the side of, going a little too hard while I was young.
Yeah.
Figure ride it till the wheels come off, and hopefully by the time we're retired, technology's so good, we'll just get that injection and just lubricate everything. And I figure I'm not holding back anytime soon.
I mean, think about stem cell injections, right? Those didn't exist 10 years ago, but then like one of my friends got a stem cell injection into his knee. I was like, what the heck? You can inject stem cells? Like it's evolving. By the time we're retired, man, I'm thinking by the time we're recovered, they're going to like completely be able to heal brain damage, even from really bad concussions.
Right. When my son was born 2 years ago, they give you the option to save, I don't remember if it was some of
his umbilical cord.
Yeah, the umbilical cord. And I was thinking instantly, like, can I use it? Can he use it? Should I be saving this for whatever reason? And basically they said, like you pay a lot of money just to store it. And it's really only for it. Their thinking was like, it's for like rare diseases that you might need, some form of therapy. But I was thinking like stem cells and get those, but yeah.
Wow. I think this is a really good stopping point. And for viewers, I think let's definitely bring back Lucas for another talk. If you guys have any questions,
I'd love to be here. I just love talking. So
yeah, it's great. And, there's so much we haven't covered still. So I'm sure we could set another conversation, talk about other things, whether like China related funny stories or I got
training. Crazy stories from China. If you ever wanted to talk, like I also have like ideas about what it takes to be a successful martial artist, like the different facets from your physical conditioning, your diet, nutrition, exercise, and condition, recovery, psychology. I'm not a guru and all that stuff, but I do have ideas. So if we ever want to do it again, I'd be more than happy.
Yeah, 100%. So guys, this is Shifu Lucas Geller from the Chinese Martial Arts Academy in Albany. So, Lucas, one day I'll come visit you because I know Albany is also a historic city, man. So I love to come. It's like two things. I go film stuff for my History Channel. I'll come visit you, film your school. So I'll get it done one day.
Yeah. We'll train. We'll have fun. We'll eat good food.
Yeah, exactly. And I look forward to meeting your wife and your son one day too.
Yeah, likewise. I look forward to having you come and meet them.
Exactly. So for viewers watching, I'm going to stop recording now, but I'll talk a little bit more with Lucas. So everyone go follow Lucas. I'll put his Instagram and I'll put his YouTube channel and his website. So go follow them and leave your questions below.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.